going to be looking at a reading strategy today. A reading strategy that you've probably heard before and we've probably talked about, but we're going to get to practice it today, okay? And the reading strategy that we're going to look at is summarizing. Can you say that? Summarizing. And the reason why you need to know how to summarize is because when you're reading, good readers, as they read parts of the story, they always summarize the most important parts of the story, okay? And we're going to learn to do that. When you summarize, it's important to stop and think about what you just read. So you don't always have to summarize at the end of a story. You can begin summarizing certain parts of the story. You can chunk the story. And as you read, you're summarizing. What was the most important part? So today we're going to practice by telling about the most important event. And sometimes that event can be a problem or a solution. What caused the problem? How was it resolved? Okay. When you summarize, you should also think about who are the characters. Who are the most important characters, okay? Because not all characters in a story are that important to the story. But as you read, you'll start figuring out as you're summarizing what characters are the most important part. Sometimes when you summarize, you might have to include the setting, only if it's important to the story. Another thing about a summary, this is the one you're going to really like. A summary, you need to keep it short. A summary is always short. It's short and quick when you tell about it, but it has to be correct. So when you're summarizing, you can't invent things that weren't in the story. You can't invent characters that were not in the story. A summary is always correct. The facts are correct, but it's just the important events, just what was most important in this. So I'm going to model it for you. Are you ready? It's important that they know the word and what it means. I want them to understand that it's a strategy that they can use. It's something that they're going to learn to do. I'm going to walk them through it. And it's kind of like setting an objective. This is what you're going to learn. This is why it's important. And this is what good readers do. It's not only a reading strategy, but it's a comprehension strategy. Okay, now, as I read that piece of the story, I had to think in my mind, if I was going to summarize that, I'm going to think of only the important parts, only the important events. So I'm going to stop and think about what I just read. I read about a little girl named Maya and a gift she received from her grandfather. Okay? So I know those are the two important characters that I'm going to have to include in my summary. I'm also going to have to include the most important event. What happened? Well, I know what was important is that she got a special gift from her granddaddy, and it was a pig. Okay? So I'm going to try to make that short. The way I begin teaching summarizing is I try to provide visuals, not just tell them, but provide visuals using verbs, telling them exactly what you're doing, the behaviors that you have to do, so that they're practicing it before it comes natural, that they're actually identifying when they're doing it before it comes natural. So for example, like think, stop and think, tell. Of course, this would be done on their own as they're reading, but I like to do it just to model. So I always start with modeling the strategy, explaining the strategy, why it's important, and then modeling it for them. Let's start thinking how we're going to summarize what we just read. Let's look at our criteria chart. Okay, stop and think what we just read. Give yourself a minute or a few seconds to think about what you just read. Okay, remember we're not going on. We're just going to summarize until there. Okay, now let's think about the most important events. What's going on? What's going on with Julius? What's happening? What are we finding out about Julius? Simpreet?
Julius is making a big mess.
Julius is not a very good guest. He's making a big mess in the house. Did she include the main character? Who was that main character, boys and girls? Julius. Yeah, Julius. Do you think we need to include the setting, like where he was making a big mess?
Yes.
Think that's important? No? Yeah? I think think it would be to say he's making a big mess? Where is he making a big mess, boys and girls? Everywhere in the house. Okay, and so if we said Julius is making a big mess in the house, is that short? Yeah. Is it correct? We're not making up any settings. We're not making up any characters or any facts. I think we could put that on our summary here. As I write, can you try to read with me?
Yes.
A mess in... Do you think we need to include Maya to know that it's her house?
Yes.
Yeah, because she's another important character. Yeah, in Maya's... I don't think Maya seems to mind, huh? Who minds more than Maya? Do you think we need to include that, or should we wait to include that in our main event? Let's wait. Okay, we might need to include it. Good job at summarizing. We kept it short. We included our setting, characters, and the most important event. I think that's what the story is trying to tell us. Julius isn't a very good house guest. He's very, very messy. And the reason why it's important that the kids know the steps of stop and think is because it's a behavior that they need to do independently. So that's why we really give them, I guess, the language of stop and think. Good readers don't just read through a passage quickly without really stopping, thinking about it, really checking themselves if they understand what they're reading. Okay, so what can we say about what we just read? We're learning a little bit more about Julius. So far we know he's making messes in Maya's house. What else do we know, though? What else are we learning? Why don't you think about a good summary, including all those things, and tell the person next to you. What do you think? What a good summary. What can you tell me about Julius? What do you guys think? What about Julius? What can we say? Did we learn something new about Julius? What else?
Keep on making mess.
And what else? Does he always make mess, or is he kind of fun sometimes?
He kind of fun sometimes.
Yeah, okay, so that would be a good idea. The way I know that they're summarizing successfully is what I try to do, like first model, then we do a lot of guided practice, we do them together, and then I'll have them do a little part by themselves. That's how I knew if they understood what it was, summarizing short, to the point, one sentence, and getting the main idea. Let's read our story so far. Let's look at what we have, our summary. Let's read it together. Ready? Maya gets a gift from her granddaddy. It is a pig named Julius. Julius is making a mess in Maya's house. The other Julius is fun. Okay, fun. We can also say he's also fun because there's not two pigs. It's just he's also fun. I wrote first, so I modeled the strategy. I just told them this is what it looks like. These are my expectations. We went over our criteria chart. It's almost like a rubric of what a good summary is, so we would check each sentence. And then I had them participate in helping me design sentences that were summaries. And the last one, I just wanted to see if they were able to summarize that last piece that we read together, if they were able to summarize it. I just wanted them to write it down. So in your journals, I want you to write one sentence that would summarize that last part in your journals. If you want a reminder of how to summarize, you can look up here. So Mrs. Smith and I are going to be walking around. You might have to think of what was happening, what happened at the end.